Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're someone who's been applying for grants, living off of government assistance programs, or even just trying to get your small business, nonprofit, or educational pursuit off the ground with the help of public or private funding, you're going to want to listen closely to this breaking story. Across the country, hundreds of grants, federal, state, local, and even privately funded, have recently been abruptly cancelled. We're talking about programs that were previously approved, money that was already promised, and in many cases, funds that applicants had already started to depend on. What happened? Why are these grants being cancelled? And more importantly, how can you avoid the common mistakes that are leading to these devastating outcomes? Let's break it down. This is one of the biggest under-the-radar funding shakeups we've seen in recent memory. While big stories about inflation, elections, and international conflicts have dominated the headlines, quietly in the background, numerous grant programs have either frozen their disbursements, recalled awarded funds, or outright cancelled their initiatives. The reasons are both alarming and instructive. In many of these cases, the cancellations were not because of fraud or intentional misuse, though yes, those things still happen, but because of overlooked errors, missed deadlines, poor documentation, or small violations of compliance standards. Imagine that. You go through the effort of writing a compelling application, submitting all the required materials, maybe even hiring a consultant or paying for help, and you get approved only to have the funding pulled later due to a clerical mistake. It's a nightmare scenario, and it's affecting real people and organizations across the country. Let's look at the scope of this problem. Recent audits from several state governments and federal agencies, including the Department of Education, the Small Business Administration, and the Department of Health and Human Services, have flagged discrepancies in grant distribution and reporting. In one notable case in Illinois, a workforce development program saw over $12 million in grant funds retracted after a post-award audit revealed that several recipients failed to meet ongoing reporting requirements. These weren't just new applicants either, some were long-standing recipients who had previously passed similar audits. But this time, things changed. Requirements tightened. Oversight became more stringent. And the result? Funding was cancelled, staff laid off, projects abandoned, and communities left in the lurch. The same thing happened in Texas, where multiple school districts were notified that they had lost access to special education grants due to errors in documentation. In one case, a district failed to submit its mid-year performance report on time. Just one day late, and the penalty was severe. Grant terminated. Funds frozen. And it doesn't end there. Across sectors from healthcare to environmental projects, arts organizations to tribal programs, funding is being yanked back with little warning, and sometimes with very little explanation. It's a chilling reminder that receiving a grant is only the beginning. Staying compliant, organized, and responsive is just as important, if not more. Now, let's talk about why this is happening now. According to policy analysts and grant management experts, we're in a time of heightened scrutiny. Several factors are converging all at once. First, there's the post-pandemic recovery phase, where federal and state agencies are being asked to justify the vast amounts of money that were distributed under emergency measures. With trillions allocated through the American Rescue Plan, the CARES Act, and other emergency funding bills, watchdog organizations are under pressure to audit, review, and clamp down on any signs of mismanagement. That means grant recipients from 2020 to 2023 are now facing retroactive reviews, sometimes being held to compliance standards that weren't clearly communicated at the time. Second, there's the 2024 election cycle. As candidates ramp up their campaigns, funding accountability becomes a hot button issue. Nobody wants to be accused of wasting taxpayer money, especially in today's hyper-partisan environment. So what do lawmakers do? They lean on agencies to show that they're being tough on waste, fraud, and abuse, even if that means penalizing well-intentioned organizations over technical mistakes. Add to that the recent staffing shortages in government agencies, which often lead to inconsistent communication and unclear guidance, and you've got a perfect storm. Funding is being granted and then clawed back, not because recipients are bad actors, but because the system itself is overwhelmed and hyper-cautious. So let's get into the heart of it. What are the actual mistakes being made that lead to cancelled grants? The first and perhaps most common one is failing to meet reporting requirements. This can include progress updates, financial expenditure reports, or performance metrics. Many grants, especially federal ones, require quarterly or annual updates. Miss a deadline, skip a section, or use the wrong format, and you may be flagged. And here's the kicker: often, recipients don't even know they've made a mistake until it's too late. They might get one generic warning email, and by the time they notice or respond, the deadline has passed and the funding is gone. Another big mistake is poor documentation. When you receive a grant, you're not just responsible for spending the money, you're responsible for proving that you spent it correctly. That means saving receipts, contracts, payroll records, and even communications with vendors. For nonprofits and small businesses that aren't used to this level of record keeping, it's easy to fall short. Unfortunately, we didn't know, or we thought we were doing it right won't save your funding when the auditors come knocking. Then there's the issue of budget deviations. Most grants are awarded with very specific budget categories in place. Let's say you received $100,000 with $25,000 allocated to personnel, $50,000 to equipment, and $25,000 to outreach. If you decide to shift $10,000 from equipment to personnel without requesting an official amendment, you've technically violated the terms of your grant. Again, even if your intentions are good, even if the shift was necessary, and even if the outcome was positive, if you didn't follow the formal amendment process, your funding is at risk. Misunderstanding eligibility criteria is another trap. In some cases, organizations or individuals apply for grants believing they qualify based on a general interpretation of the rules. But later, during the verification or audit stage, they're told that a small detail like operating in the wrong geographic area, having a board member with a conflict of interest, or not meeting a minimum size requirement disqualifies them retroactively. It's like building a house only to be told after completion that you never had the permit. There's also a growing issue with automated application systems. Many agencies now use online portals to manage applications, progress reports, and compliance documentation. These systems can be glitchy, confusing, or inconsistent. We've heard stories of applicants uploading documents that disappear from the system, auto-saved drafts that don't submit properly, and status notifications that fail to update in real time. Unfortunately, if the system doesn't log your submission even if you submitted it, you're still liable for the consequences. So what can you do to protect yourself and your organization? First, be meticulous about deadlines. Create a calendar with reminders well in advance of every required submission. Don't assume that because you submitted something last year the same way, that it will be sufficient this year. Second, document everything. Keep digital and physical copies of every report, communication, and receipt. Consider using grant management software or even a basic spreadsheet tracker to stay organized. Third, know your grant's terms inside and out. If you're unsure about any detail, whether it's about allowable expenses, reporting formats, or amendment procedures, contact your grant officer directly. Don't guess. Another key strategy is to build redundancy into your grant management process. Don't let one person be solely responsible for everything. If that person gets sick, takes a leave, or quits, your entire operation could fall apart. Train at least one backup and make sure they have access to all necessary files and communications. And perhaps most importantly, never ignore a notice from your grant agency, no matter how small or confusing it may seem. A single overlooked email can be the difference between keeping or losing your funding. Some organizations are taking it a step further by conducting internal audits. This means setting aside time each quarter to review their own grant compliance, just like an outside auditor would. It may seem like overkill, but in this current climate, it's increasingly necessary. Especially for nonprofits and educational institutions that rely heavily on public funds, staying one step ahead of compliance standards can be the key to survival. We should also mention that some agencies are offering support and technical assistance. If you're worried about your compliance, ask for help. Many funders actually prefer proactive grantees who ask questions rather than silent ones who make mistakes. They might have webinars, templates, or one-on-one coaching available. Use those resources. And finally, stay informed. Subscribe to updates from your funding agencies, attend informational sessions, and follow the latest news about grant policy changes. In a world where a single new clause in a grant agreement can change everything, being informed is your best defense. So where do we go from here? Clearly, this isn't just a blip, it's a trend. And as painful as these cancellations are, they also carry important lessons. Grants are not free money. They are legal agreements with obligations on both sides. If we want to continue benefiting from these vital funding sources, whether for small businesses, public health projects, schools, or community work, we have to treat them with the same seriousness as we would a business contract or government regulation. Let this be a wake-up call. Not a reason to fear grants, but a reason to engage with them more responsibly. There is still a lot of money out there. New grants are being released every month, and funding opportunities continue to grow. But if we don't tighten up our processes and learn from what's happening right now, we risk losing access to these resources altogether. Remember, these mistakes aren't being made by lazy people or scammers, they're being made by dedicated individuals and teams who simply didn't realize how strict the system has become. So don't wait until it's too late. Review your current grants today. Set up that internal audit. Ask your grant officer that question you've been meaning to ask. Make the changes you need to stay compliant, because the risk of cancellation is real, and the consequences are serious. Thanks for sticking with me on this deep dive. If you found this video helpful or eye-opening, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe for more updates like this. Drop a comment if you've ever faced a grant issue or have tips for staying compliant. I want to hear your stories. Until next time, stay smart, stay organized, and don't let your funding slip away.